dream of one human family under God a reality.
우리가 함께 지상 천국을 만들 수 있다는 이 흥분된 기쁨과 환희에 찬 그날을 향한 함성이 전 세계에 우렁차게 펼쳐나가기를 축원합니다.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would say also Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Om Shanti Shanti, and peace be with you. Please, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in prayer. Almighty, merciful, and loving God, struggle and enmity in this world is between us as brothers and sisters. For this reason, we seek the parental love and wisdom that faith provides, so that I can examine the shortcomings or even blindness within myself first, and then reach out to make peace and unity with others, with a heart that is rooted in yours. Please bless our proceedings today as people of various faiths and conscientious people of no particular faith join in the common purpose to advance the cause of peace, healing past wrongs and working for a better future. These things we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
For Universal Peace Federation, the idea of peacemaking and reconciliation is very much a core goal, because it brings humankind back. It brings hope for development, hope for prosperity, hope for the families of every race of humankind to come together. So I think for each of our organizations it's very similar.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. My dear friends, brothers and sisters, I greet you with Islamic greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May peace and blessing of Almighty God be upon you all. Dear friend in humanity, our aim should be to establish, to hold a permanent peace around the world. Truly peace is possible to grab hold. Peace is so near to us that I can hold it, I can grab and hold it. But unfortunately the problem is my hands are so slippery. As soon as I try to hold it, it just slips out of my hand. Over the 40 years, I'm trying to grab hold of peace around the world. Nothing happened. I try to find why peace is so slippery that I cannot hold it. Of course, I say always I, and that means in general. When I look seriously to this problem, I find that peace is not a slippery itself. It is my hand is slippery. My hand is got so slippery by holding hatred, jealousy, greed, racism, torture, war, destruction of any kind. And by the same hand, I would love to hold peace. It's not going to work. It is not going to work. 40 years around the world I'm trying to. It's not going to work. I find it impossible. Peace and hatred bringing together is impossible. My dear friends, we should learn from the famous word of Nelson Mandela, who said, as I walked out the doors toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would have been still in prison. Dear friends in humanity, if we wish to free ourselves from the prison of hatred conflict and war, we must follow his example. Famine, destruction, war, genocide, torture, slavery, killing, burning, and all kinds happening. All happening in any and every part of the world at the moment. And it is only because the man wants to hold all hatred and any kind, all hatred of any kind, in the same hand that man wants to hold peace. Peace would not stay in the same hand. Dear friends, the story, of course, is too long. The story of the hatred and bitterness is too long. It's a human history. We have got no time for that. Dear friends, but what I said, of course, be sure, despite what I said, we should not be downhearted. Still we have time. Still we have time. We can all work together for the sake and saving humanity. Saving humanity, we have to work together. We all can wash our hands and clean our hands and our hearts from any hatred and wrongdoing, physically and spiritually. Doesn't matter who we are. Then when we grab hold of the peace, we will keep it in our heart and in our soul and hold it until this is the way. And when we've done that, my dear friend, when we've done that, then you will see the sun will shine once more on the human face, which has been so darkened by the bitterness and hatred of each other. I would like to offer a short prayer for the humanity, peace and work which we are doing today. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. O dear Lord Allah, dear Lord Allah, the glorious, the most compassionate, the most merciful. O dear Lord, we ask you to open the hearts of all we meet, so we may convey the message of peace in our homes and families, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, countries, and across the world. We ask you, Lord, to unite us all in peace. The families which torn apart, countries which divided, and nations at war. Restoring us our faith in you, Allah, our faith in unity, our faith in humanity, our faith in friends and families, our faith in each other. May our efforts be sincere and fruitful, and may our commitment to peace bring other friends and families into this fold so they may to experience the beauty of being at peace. May our courage match our conviction and our integrity match our hope. May our efforts be accepted and fruitful, and may the work we do here help to spread the peace across the world.
So the Universal Peace Federation was started in 2005 on the basis of a number of other organizations which preceded it. And under that umbrella then a lot of activities have been ongoing in many different parts of the world. It's also got consultative status, general consultative status with the American Social Council of the UN. And I wanted to show a video, if we could move to that video, about its recent activities. One of our main goals currently is a summit that we have in February, and we're going to gather many VIPs and bring a lot of the different activities together in a major event in Korea in February. So this is from this February 2019, but it shows a lot of the recent activities.
We have only one Earth. Yet today on this planet, there is war and hunger. We inhabit a world that too often dampens our hopes and threatens our highest values and aspirations. The Universal Peace Federation is going beyond this destruction, division and conflict, and is creating initiatives for world peace. NGO in general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, a peace alliance with a network of 194 peace-promoting chapters. The founders, Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, have led the way in taking action to realize world peace and have worked together with heads of state, Nobel Prize laureates, religious figures, and other leaders from various fields to realize that goal.
There is a difference between being a peacekeeper and being a peacemaker. And I think making peace requires quite a considerable amount of effort on our part. It means that we have to get engaged and involved with areas that are broken, people's lives that are fractured, societies that aren't operating at their optimum, relationships that are broken down. And to make peace in those environments means we actually need to engage with the actual process, or to become very spiritual about it. We need to incarnate the thing that we want to see, and that peaceful disposition. As Robin said, my name is Paul Guttridge. I've recently taken the helm of serving in leadership at Initiatives of Change UK. And IFC has a very rich history of peacemaking, of trust building across the decades under different guises and names. So it started as the Oxford Group, and Moral Rearmament, etc. And its modern iteration, if you like, is Initiatives of Change. And we have a driving, a rallying call and cry, and that is to build trust across the world's divides.
Me and my sister were maybe 10 years old. We were brought out onto the landing. We could see downstairs my parents were kneeling down with guns to the back of their heads by soldiers and by the police. My 8-month-old brother was dangled over the banisters and my parents could do nothing. And I'm looking going, why can't they do anything? Why are they not helping? And my other brother was knocked out by a policeman as he tried to grab my brother. So 8 o'clock in the morning came, we had breakfast and we went to school, a normal day. So this became my life, and that's the way it was. One of my sisters actually joined at 16 the IRA. I decided that I would go down the drug road. I would go down the smoke and dope road and the drink road, because I wanted to just completely anaesthetize myself from our life. It was normal for us, but I knew that it wasn't right. So at 14 years old, I'm going down this road. My parents were doing their best, you know, and it was wasn't all bad. We had great fun, you know. We did have good times. We had a caravan in Donegal, and every summer we get to go away to the beach. Lovely. Anyway, I don't want to go on too much about that. But at 14, I went to a retreat. We had it every year in Derry, and it was we had to do it. This was part of our Catholic faith. We'd done this. We were on this side of the water. We had the Protestant people on the other side, but our faith told us every year we'd done the retreat because you were making a difference. You were appeasing God. I went to confession under a priest, and this man told me, after I gave him a whole spiel of what I'd done wrong, waiting for the, there you go, that'll do you, 3 Hail Marys and a glory be, you're fine, going on. This priest told me, do you know that God wants to speak with you? He wants to talk with you. And I'm looking at this man going, what? Because God was way out there. He was somewhere else. He was not with me. I never had a sense that God was with me. So this man spoke to me, and for the first time I was like, wow, could this be real? Could God speak to me? So he gave me general absolution. And I was high as a kid. I left that place feeling for the first time in my life that I was clean. And when I got outside the steps of the Long Tower Chapel, there's 3 loads of steps down, and when I got to the middle step, I fell. I busted my knee, I tore my clothes, and I got up and swore and thought, do I have to go back there? Do I have to do this again? You know, how can I can't live this good life, I can't be this good. So I just went on partying. I left that, I parked it, and I headed on with my life.
My name is Tom, and I'm from Derry, Londonderry, Stroke City. It's got all different names because even the name of the city can cause a lot of problems and conflict by what way you answer, depending who's asking. Can even in time past cost you your life. I call it Derry because that's in the background that I come from. It's a very nationalist Catholic background, and it's an area up the north of Ireland. It's the 2nd largest city, Derry, but it's an area of Northern Ireland where the 35-year conflict began, and some people would say that it's also where it ended, thanks to our Nobel laureate John Hume, a great man of peace and democracy, and a good friend of ourselves and the artists, who created an open-air art gallery that simply tells the story of a community. It's a story of a community in conflict, all the things that we experience, both the highs, the lows, the achievements for basic civil and human rights, but also the atrocities that happened around our community. I don't have the time to go into any real detail, but as my wife explained, we have lived our lives there, and we've seen at close hand what violence, segregation, polarization, and all those things that socially abuse us in many, many ways. And usually, in my opinion, sometimes kept alive by the people at the top for all sorts of reasons and agendas, usually financial. There's a lot of money in conflict, a lot of money in peace as well. You can give lectures about it, you can build buildings, peace centers, you can write books about it. But as Michelle explained, we're unashamedly 2 followers of Christ. We're Christians in that environment, and we heartily believe in getting your hand dirty. We're called to be salt and light, not to hide away, and to get involved on a very personal level, on a very human level with the people in our community. I think that's our calling. I think think that's what we do.
Yeah, could I have killed somebody if I felt somebody was about to shoot and it was very often to throw a bomb? And it made me realise, thinking about this, that first of all, to do that, we actually have to dehumanise the enemy. That language where they're terrorists, they're what? The Nazis spoke of Jews and homosexuals as vermin or rats, which needed to be eliminated. And this is why I'm going to take up this word polarisation. I think our use of language is so important, and any dehumanising of other people begins to lead to violence and problems. And I hope that people engaging in the election campaign, perhaps I should say all who go to watch football matches, recognise this. The saying, isn't there, they begin by burning books, they end by burning people. And so, and that's just that phrase, quite often you hear people call somebody, oh, you're a waste of space. Just think about it. It's a horrific term, isn't it? And so easily we allow our language to demonise others.
I'm going to demonstrate a practical example of reconciliation and peace building by citing the example of the Medina of the Sikhs, which is Kartarpur Sahib in Pakistan. Just to give a brief introduction, right at this moment, as we speak, both the governments of India and Pakistan are there on that spot trying to open the road which had been closed for the last 70 years to the Sikh pilgrims to their Medina. As President Imran Khan said, how can you stop people going to their Medina? So it is a great occasion for the Sikh community, the Sikhs from all over the world.
I decided with my parents that they disowned me totally because I decided to go towards a different faith. And for them it was very difficult to accept the reality of my choice. I was young, I was 18, maybe perhaps naive or perhaps zealous in my desire to do something good for the sake of others. But in that naivety, I kind of also left my faith. And I felt in some sense I need to reconcile this. So reconciliation is not about huge things, but it is also about personal reconciliation with ourselves. It would have been easier for me just to be disowned and do my own thing. I was young and naive and I was quite happy to go that way. But actually, from the church community that I belong to, the elders of the community encouraged me to go back and restore this relationship with my parents, because it is essential that we don't lose the essence of who we are as human beings. And because of this encouragement, I decided to take that path. My parents lived in Birmingham, and I used to visit once a year, and I would knock on the door. My parents would not open the door to let me into the house. I was disowned. I was dishonored family name. And this is nothing to do with my parents, it was just my decisions. But because of my church community that encouraged me to go ahead and restore this relationship, it is very important. Time is very important. We cannot leave anything for too long. Because my parents were not so young, and it took me 15 years actually, in reality, going from London to Birmingham, knocking on the door. My parents would not open the door, only the curtains from the windows would flicker. But somehow in this humility in my father, he finally did open the door. And of course my mother was in the background, don't let her in, don't let her in. But my father says, come on. Everybody said what they want to say about our family, our reputation and whatever, and our honour. And eventually I did go into the family. And it was my first time to step back into my childhood home since I was 18. And it was just like being settled again, you know. I felt a new, fresh wind come into my life, which I thought I was quite happy and content. But without that reconciliation, one can never be happy and content. So I understand what you were saying about your experiences with your family. I think family is the source of all happiness, and we have to go back and restore those relationships. Only on that basis can we go out into our neighbourhood and communities, because that's where we learn how to really practice these loves. The love of a parent, the love of a child, the love of a spouse. Everything is important, and it's our training ground. And actually, after I'd really broken through this relationship with my parents, it was only after 5 years my mother passed away after that. And I was so glad I made the effort during that 15 years of kind of being in the wilderness, in a sense of knocking and knocking and knocking, and finally the door opened. I have no regrets about doing that. It was painful.
Too often in the history of religion, people have killed in the name of the God of life, waged war in the name of the God of peace, hated in the name of the God of love, and practiced cruelty in the name of the God of compassion. When that happens, God speaks sometimes in a still, small voice, almost inaudible amongst the clamour of those claiming to speak on his behalf. What he says at such times is, "Not in my name." That's an excerpt from a book whose author is former Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Faith communities, for me, at their very best, have the capacity to play a critical role in the nurturing and rebuilding of community, especially where there is division. Where there is shared values and vision, if we believe in the pursuit of peace, believe in life lived in all its fullness, believe in the dignity and value of every human being, believe in the unrelenting love for our brother and sister, regardless of faith, creed, or ethnicity. How can we, in our faith-based communities, develop between us a shared vision that speaks of peace and reconciliation, that leaves behind those things that might divide us, but focuses on those things that would unite us, so that together we might develop family values, liberty, equality, and work towards resolutions on issues of social justice. Mark Gopin suggests that where there is the pursuit of peace and reconciliation, relationships depend on gestures of honour, shared understandings of civility, generosity, expressions of regret, and a shared defence against suffering. There is for me a real integrity to that kind of a conversation, a real honesty in a process that seeks to find common ground, and a way forward that is not ignorant of the real problems, but desires to work towards real solutions to difficult issues.
About 30 years ago, I heard the voice of God on the London Underground. And it started me on a path from simply being a believer in faith to somebody who wanted to make a life for building peace. And it was rather a funny encounter. I would just missed my train, And as one does when standing on the underground having missed a train, my eye went across the tracks to a big poster on the opposite wall. No images, just text. And the text said this: "It's not your fault that this country is going down the drain. It's the man standing next to you on the platform." Looking at that, just out of my peripheral vision, I thought, he's there. That man is there. So, you know, being British and not wanting to be rude, I tried to say, "Is this man whose fault it is?" And of course, in that very moment, he and their eyes met, and we smiled, realized I can be part of the problem. It's very easy for us to feel that we're part of the solution and you are part of the problem. But in many ways, the journey to peace comes with recognizing I can be somebody else's problem. I can be God's problem, actually, even as we just heard movingly, in his name. I spent a lot of this year in the Balkans, down in Tirana, Albania. Even though the war ended 20 years ago, the peace has not come. Everybody thought that by now, with the benefits of economic development and political freedom and gradual freedom of movement, that the Balkans would be transformed. But it isn't, because this mental, spiritual baggage is still there, and people are stuck. So, we worked hard, and we believed that we were making real progress. We managed to persuade Serbian members of parliament to come and sit with members of parliament from other countries. And then, just a week before the event, there was a major disruption. The European Union decided not to even begin talks to admit Albania and North Macedonia into the European Union. Now, I mean, this may be hard to understand here in Britain, but there are people trying to get into the European Union desperately. And this rejection opened up, like the tearing off of that plaster, all the old resentments. And why did this happen? It's because of Serb propaganda, or it's because of this group or that group. And into this cauldron of dissatisfaction and finger-pointing, our UPF founder, Mother Moon, arrived in Tirana. And of course, it was my job to give her a briefing on how things stood. That far from being, ready to hear voices of peace, there are many spoiling for a fight, actually hurting, aggrieved, angry, and ready to blame somebody else.
As Margaret mentioned, my name is Matteo and I run an organisation called Shout Out UK. We're a youth network that tries to get more young people engaged and involved in politics by primarily running political literacy courses and media literacy courses in secondary schools and colleges. So this is about understanding how our system works, understanding what our councillors, what our MPs, how does a bill become a law, all the sort of bare bone basics that frankly should already be on the curriculum. But for one reason that isn't, as well as something called media literacy, which is how to critically analyse information, understanding what disinformation is, misinformation, and understanding that a fact that you disagree with is not fake news, it's a fact that you simply disagree with. Something that someone should probably tell the current resident at the White House. But one thing that I wanted to chat about today is the element of trust. And as you can probably imagine, one of the two types of leaders up there has a bit of a trust issue. I'm going to let you guys guess which one. But trust is a massively important thing. And one of the biggest issues I find when going into schools, and we've gone into just over 700 across the UK, teaching political literacy and engagement in politics. And one of the biggest recurring issues we come across is the complete lack of trust in politicians, in our politics, between generations. There's very little trust between young and old and vice versa. There's very little trust between young people and the police. There is very little trust between political opposing ideals. Let's not even mention the B word because I don't want to ruin your day. But there's a massive lack of trust within our society at the moment. And I feel like, talking about peace building, without trust there can be no peace. Because, and I'll challenge you guys to sort of think back throughout your life, if you actively don't trust that person, you're not going to turn around and be like, oh, here, can you hold my wallet for a day? If you actively don't trust that person, you're not going to listen to them or take their advice or heed what they're saying. You're going to always question it. That's going to breed resentment. And for me, one of the things that I find most interesting is that that's one of the biggest, most divisive things that's currently happening, I'd say, in the UK, but you can probably take this model across the world. A massive breakdown of trust within different groupings in society that tend not to talk to each other is a massive, massive barrier to peace. And building that trust is so hugely important. And one of the ways that we found that works really well is getting people together in a room, doing activities, hackathons, and engaging with them from different demographics, from different places in life, from different faiths, different creeds, whatever. And this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love UPS mission, because it's the idea of bringing people that normally maybe wouldn't talk to each other, but bringing them together with the spirit of building trust and building communication. We did an event, which may sound a bit strange, but bear with me. In July, we brought a load of young people together with politicians at Brunel University to play ping pong. It was a sporting competition between politicians, and then we had workshops and a debate and so forth. And what was incredible was that they started to break down those barriers because of that lack of trust and started talking to each other as if they're human beings. And in fact, one young person didn't realise that politicians were actually human beings because they don't seem like it on the media. And that, for me, was really quite interesting because the media and the internet, online social media, has corroded that trust even further. Because if you strip away their job titles, politicians are human beings at the end of the day. And if you consistently pick up newspapers, see on Twitter, another young person stabbed another young person's done that, another young person's done this, and the media obviously always prioritise a specific skin colour because they're apparently the only people that are doing any of this, when in reality that's not true. You as a human being are going to want to start legislating and reacting in a certain way. In the same way as you're a police officer and you constantly see it in TV and you hear it from family and friends, you're going to start reacting that same way in your job. And then on the flip side, when young people, when they see online or when they ever have an interaction with the police, it's always negative or something like that, they're going to start building an element of distrust and dislike of that specific demographic without ever actually having a conversation with those other people with that kind of industry. And breaking down those barriers and having that event, we brought people together from different, essentially, walks of life, was massively powerful, not just for the young people, also for politicians, to realise, hey, we're legislating on the wrong things. And we're talking about the wrong issues, so we need to listen to these people. Yes. And you think it's a no-brainer, but some people need to be told that actually you do need to listen to the next generation, surprisingly enough. And what really cemented it for me was this coming general election on the 12th of December. Because what we're seeing is now, rather than going towards an element of trust and trying to connect and collaborate with each other, regardless of what age, demographic, ethnicity, or whatever you come from, we're actually entrenching ourselves even further. So you look at, for example, the way politicians are now, the way political parties, the garbage they're putting out at the moment is so inflammatory. Every single political party is guilty of it. And you see them put out fake statistics, misinformed facts, because they are essentially appealing to the lowest common denominator. They're appealing to people's fears. They're appealing to people's dislikes of another group that they've never met. They're appealing to fears that are just, there's no basis of reality in those fears. But they know that emotions, when riled up, are more important than fact. I remember hearing one academic once say that we're living in a post-factual society where facts don't really matter. It's not about what's real, it's about what someone makes you believe is real. And that for me is so ridiculously true. It was true in 2016, it is true now. And the way we move forward from that, and I think all of us are responsible, but the way we move forward from that is making sure that we communicate with different groups that we don't normally communicate with. We as an organisation, we try and strive to make sure that young people communicate with older people. Because one of the biggest issues now is there is a complete generational disconnect. You've got the, essentially, for lack of a better term, baby boomer generation that constantly hear about, young people being soft or young people being snowflakes and all this kind of rubbish, and saying, oh, well, you've never had it so easy because you've got a phone. And young people, on the other hand, saying, well, you've never had it so easy because you could buy a house for £9 grand. Whereas now I can buy, I can't even buy a cardboard box for that amount of money.
After all, it is your generation. We are making decisions today, not for our generation, but for your generation. And that's why it's so important. And I really it would be nice to think that some of your activities that you were describing are responsible for what we're now seeing, which is a massive increase in the registration of young people to vote in this general election. I suspect that 3 years ago there were a lot of young people who didn't participate in the referendum, who felt bitterly disappointed afterwards that they had not participated, and I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. And I hope and pray that a lot of young people feel that not participating when they have the chance in the political process is not going to get their voice listened to. Why is it that people like me have got a triple lock pension, some of the people in this room now, because we turn out to vote and governments respond to that? Why is it that we still got student loans as an enormous burden on the back of so many students? Because students don't turn out to vote, and so therefore the politicians can get away with it. So it's that we need to have that young voice coming in and saying to the politician, you need to listen to us, not just to the older generation. But the trouble with religion is the way it's interpreted by us, by human beings, and has been over the centuries. The great schisms, the great bloodletting, the Inquisition, all those terrible blots on the face of religion have been as a result of the interpretation, very often for political reasons, transporting the whole message of religion and violating it in terms of the way it is actually applied. So I think it's important to remember that we are the ones who spoil religion, not religion itself. Principles are really important.
We invoke Om, the supreme name of God, and we pray. O God, may there be peace in heaven, peace in the sky and in the atmosphere. May there be peace on earth. May there be peace in the waters. May the herbs be healing and the plants be peace-giving. May there be peace and harmony among the celestial objects and perfection in eternal knowledge. May there be peace. May that peace come to us. May there be peace, peace, and nothing but peace in our inner self. Say, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.